Well, it's all come down to this. The final week in the Bad Quarterback League, where I can still talk about what could happen instead of next week when I talk about what did happen. Although, there is something I can say did happen last week, and that is...
Who made a mess of it?
There was a lot on the line in both leagues, with battles for promotion, the championship, and especially a four-way battle for relegation. Chris Weinke is one of those four who needed a big score in Week 16, and instead picked two of his worst teams at the worst time. Indy was playing at home against a rookie quarterback, so that's understandable. But Philly was playing for their playoff lives at home, and Weinke's other two teams were playing each other. So he starts his playoff hopeful Raiders on the road, in quotation marks, against the Chargers. Is any team playing at the Chargers really on the road? Especially the Raiders in their former homeland of Los Angeles? Especially when they need to win. I understand Philip Rivers can give you 40 bad quarterback points one day and negative 20 the next, but if you've been paying any attention to my own frustrations with the Chargers' quote-unquote defense, which gets good press in the team defense stats, but never actually shows up to play, fuck both those LA teams. Over in Hot Top Picks, we see that both leagues started Carolina and Pittsburgh, but missed out on Tampa Bay. On the worst side of things, I can't believe my own eyes. Knowing how bad some of these teams were to start 2019, listen to this list of teams who scored negative points in Week 16. The Giants scored negative 39. They haven't scored 0 or negative once before this week. Not once. You know what's surprising about that? No other team this season hasn't scored 0 or negative at least once. Pittsburgh is the only other team that hasn't scored negative, but they have scored 0. Unlucky for TSSS Win to find their first negative score, and it was a doozy. Also, Miami with a negative 29. Yes, the same Miami who scored 142 in Week 2. Cincinnati with a negative 14. The same Cincinnati who has averaged 46 points the last 6 weeks. It doesn't end there. Who could the fourth worst team this week be? Why, it's none other than Washington. Yes, the same Washington who scored 239 bad quarterback points over a 3-week span for Johnny effing Moxon earlier this year. The Turbs knew enough to stay away from these typical BQBL powerhouses, which means after 16 weeks we are all tied up. Time for Moneyballing It, this week sponsored by Chad Hutchinson. He knew well enough to keep Miami on the bench and took a chance at Green Bay, even though he needed to start them this week or the next. And it paid off as his highest scoring team of the week. He needed it too, because he's being closely pursued by a pesky second place participant. More on that later. In Relegation Watch 2019, we find Cade McNown sporting another frown as his mad dash of points seems to have slowed down to a more Tyler Pauco pace. McNown was 27 points from sniffing the fresh, non-relegated air last week, but now he's sniffing his own farts. Alright, let's get to the Week 16 standings. In first place is Johnny effing Moxon. He started his win and show horses this week, and is cruising to his second championship after TSSS Win blew it by starting the Giants. If he had started Seattle, he would have had 710 points right now, and there would be more to talk about. Speaking of not much to talk about, we have Tyler Pauco, who had a decent week, but that's usually followed up by a bad one. But it is Week 17, which usually means Pauco will find some miraculous way to either win the championship or drop all the way to 6th place. He's 100 points from 6th, but crazier things have happened, like in 2016. In 4th is Wade Wilson. Wade has been in 3rd or 4th place since Week 5. Well, I've got good news for you on that front. You might get out of 4th place next week. I've also got bad news for you. It might be at the expense of Jay Cutler or myself passing you. Now for some deep analysis on the forthcoming battle for relegation. It will all be decided next week, so let's look at some scenarios. We already have picks in for Jay Cutler and Cade McNown, knowing that of course they'll be able to change them before kickoff if they want. I'll be starting Pittsburgh and Jacksonville. The big question mark I see is Baltimore on both offense and defense. Tony Banks is hoping that since it's a home game, even some backup players don't want to disappoint the home fans. Plus maybe it's some talented guys who didn't get to play much during the year and want to make some spectacular plays so they can get traded and be start on some other team next season. The Steelers will be starting Hodges again since Rudolph re-injured himself, so even a second-string defense in Baltimore might be enough to disrupt Hodges into a third straight awful game. On the other side of the ball, we have RG3 starting for Baltimore. Who knows what will happen there? There's a lot of AFC teams on this slide. Chris Weinke's Indy team travels to one of my own starts, Jacksonville, so we could have some real head-to-head matchups in the final week. That would be exciting. I don't think Jacksonville's defense is any good anymore, and their offense has been awful as of late, with Indy coming off a very good offensive and defensive game. So who does Weinke go with then? The Chargers are at the Chiefs, and this seems like the smartest play here. Philly and the Raiders are both still playing for the playoffs, and both of them are on the road, albeit against non-playoff teams. Philly just got done playing the Giants 3 weeks ago and scored -11. The Raiders haven't played the Broncos since Week 1, but in Week 1 they put up a big fat 0. If it was me though, I'd start the Raiders or the Colts and pray for the best. Let's not forget about Jay, Mr. 100% safe Cutler, who's starting Miami on the road against New England. This should be a no-brainer. But just last week, Josh Allen had a 0 BQBL score, and I'd argue Fitzpatrick is a better quarterback. It's unfortunate the Browns are playing the Bengals to end the year, or else that would be a safe choice. So instead, you're starting Houston at home against a team who will be playing hard for their playoff lives. This game could go either way. Of course, if I drafted Houston, they would be starting a fan from a tailgate party, and he'd throw 3 touchdowns and no picks. But for you, they'll probably put up at least 15 bad quarterback points in this game. Cade's Detroit pick should be worth some solid points. I can't see Blau doing much against the Packers, but they are at home in a dome, so the BQBL score probably won't get too wild. I might be a pessimist here, but I think myself and Weinke have the highest potential for negative scores, with Cade McNown probably scoring positive. I think if all of our scores were tied, I'd be crowning McNown, but that 60-point handicap will be tough to overcome. I'd like to think Jay Cutler is safe, but hey guys, it's week 17, crazy crap happens.
Alright, well, week 11 in the Turbush League was fun. The hype really increased, but then Johnny Football passed up Ryan Leaf and Jeff George, and now we're left with this awkward moment where the writing's on the wall and we're just waiting for it to end. Ryan Leaf is not going to pass Johnny Football in the final week, and Jeff George, well, he's got the Redskins at the Cowboys, and they'll hopefully be roaring to go after letting their division slip away from their hands last week. The question is, does he play San Fran on the road in hostile Seattle for the NFC West title? Or does he go with the Schroyer special and start Houston against the playoff-hungry Titans? Either way, that's 140 points he'll have to score, and that's only if Johnny Football gets a 0 from Pittsburgh and either Tampa or his other matchup, Arizona against the Rams, who play each other. Hutchinson will be battling him for the Turbush title, which on paper means nothing, but having won it twice myself, I hold it in a special place in my heart. You other guys can start your own analysis on the Jake Delhomme Bad Quarterbacking Champions Playoff Tournament, or whatever the hell Palco officially called it. Oh yeah, Jamarcus Russell gets the game ball for hopefully not finishing in last place this year. He's only not finished in last 3 of the past 7 seasons.